Hello, welcome back to my fave fanfics. Here, I post, well, my favorite fanfictions, if that wasn't obvious. I do hope you'll enjoy them as much as I do. Please like and subscribe for more content. Without further ado, let's get started.
Welcome, my dear faves, to the fifth part of What If Minato Yeeted Himself and His Son into the World of Demon Slayer. Credit goes to SapavemLasae. Chapter 17. Walk on Water, Soar to New Heights. The week with Sakanji passes quickly. Minato finds that the water-breathing forms come easily. Not as easy as the wind-breathing forms though. No, the wind-breathing forms are easy to grasp and every bit like the Uzumaki taijutsu style Kushina had taught him. Hitori trades off every day and sends letters every day to kids watching his area. He takes up training not only Minato but also the kids, giving them a decent idea of the forms of other breathing styles. Hiroko in particular takes in several forms as she learns the airborne forms. Minato notices how easily the girl takes to the style and offers to teach her the Uzumaki taijutsu, and soon enough he is basing several moves for his breathing style off of the forms. Hiroko learns with him. It's easier for her to follow him, and soon enough Minato wonders if she would be better suited for the mixed style he is creating rather than just lightning breathing. Naruto is much the same. Minato relented in teaching him just a bit more, and now the boy was weaving through taijutsu katas with all the enthusiasm of a little kid. Minato pauses as he discusses his forms with Hitori. The Wind Hashira had quickly become a friend, and Minato found that they got along well when Hitori wasn't feeling snarky. Actually, Hitori's snarky retorts were often handled by Sakanji, who returned them with grace. The sight of the aged Hashira and the younger one bickering was interesting enough. Minato quite enjoyed their banter. It was better than Jigoro's sharp and harsh jabs. I'm thinking about basing the first form off of thunder breathing and the second form of water breathing. Hiroko gave me the idea with a kick her mother taught her, mostly for show, but she's modified it for combat with demons. Minato comments and taps his brush against the corner of his mouth. Hitori raises a brow and glances at the aforementioned girl. She meets his gaze and smiles before she sets into a loose stance. She launches herself forward as lightning flickers along her legs. She twists as she sails into the air, building momentum. The kick hits the air with a crack that leaves a trail of lightning in its wake. Naruto and Kyojuro stopped where they are currently training with Chakra. Kyojuro was walking on water and helping out Naruto, and the two watched Hiroko in awe. Hiroko ne, isn't that the kick you used on the demons? Naruto asks and hops over the pond. He nearly sinks into the water, but Kyojuro catches him as he gently chides the boy. Naruto is too excited and he springs over to Hiroko as she rights herself, her eyes shining as she grins. She's still using total concentration breathing and has greatly increased her time in it after also starting shinobi training. Yes, it's called a butterfly kick. Ka-san used a flash version of it in her improvised dances, but she taught me to defend myself. Apparently, Tu-san taught it to her. Hiroko informs the boy with a gentle smile. Minato nods and hums. It's also a kick I'm familiar with, though it's a signature move of Uzushio, and Kushina called it a maelstrom kick. I was thinking about augmenting a blade into the form and using the spinning momentum to create a quick buildup into a smooth cut. It would be useful against a single or even multiple targets and could work as a break to get you into a fight quickly. Minato tells Hattori and his eyes light up as he explains. Hattori raises a brow but chuckles. How about you show me? And what would you name it? He asks. Minato rises and Naruto backs off to Kyojuro as his father and Hiroko both take mimicked stances. Hiroko watches Minato carefully as he draws his blade. She follows his moves barely a second behind and they launch forward together. First form, Maelstrom. Minato calls and he and Hiroko twist and slash with their blades. Lightning flickers across Hiroko's blade while heat builds around Minato's strike and flames sprout from the end. The haze washes over the training ground. Hattori claps his hands, impressed. He had seen several slayers have to shift styles and even a few specific forms created from other styles before, but never something quite like this. An adapted form that brought together separate elements of 3 of the main forms. It was ingenious. What about the others? Hattori asks as he eyes the two. Hiroko waits for Minato to shift his stance and then they work through another form. This one mimics the winding flow of movement from the 10th form of water breathing and the explosive rush of circular swings from the 4th form of fire breathing. The two launched ahead and with each step, they swung their blade to create a twisting arch of fire and lightning. A circular typhoon was launched from their position and they dug through it. It was almost like they created a drill with their movements. Bare wisps of fire formed over Hiroko's blade as she breathed while Minato managed to bring up lightning and fire into a mixed blaze. His eyes were focused ahead of him on a singular target, but Hattori could see the applications of the form as a defensive and offensive technique. Hiroko huffed and had to stop to take a breather while Minato performed the next form. Hattori's eyes widen and he shifts in his seat when he notices that Minato has stalled at the end of the inferno and brought his arms up. Minato turns the winding strikes into a sharp and pointed blow that slams into the ground in a sharp burst of lightning. Hattori swears he sees the face of a demon in the blaze, mouth gaping wide and eyes burning red as it follows the arc of Minato's blade to hit the ground. It makes a deafening crack against the ground. Minato lets the elements settle around him and glances back at Hiroko. At her nod, he turns to Hattori and grins sheepishly. That was the second and third form. Second is Exploding Tempest and the third is Thunder God. I based that one off of a technique a student of mine developed using lightning chakra. I won't let Hiroko attempt it until her control improves. Minato mentions and reaches out to ruffle Hiroko's hair. The girl flushes darkly but leans into the touch. She's got the 4th form down though. Oddly enough, it's similar to the 6th form of thunder breathing, but we augmented it with chakra to help with her lightning release. Minato mentions and Hiroko turns a darker red but steps away so she can showcase the form. She enters total concentration again and lightning flares around her as she makes quick but powerful swipes through the haze. Minato can register some of water breathing's teachings in how she builds on her first strike, likely taught by Mikomo. She brings it into a concise hit as she finishes the pattern of strikes in place. It was more stationary than the majority of their forms. It was also a compound style like many of the others, but Minato found that stopping in a fight was often what got you killed in a fight. If you could turn that movement into a strike, all the better for you. The 5th form is still a work in progress, but I'm thinking of turning it into a snap strike like the 1st form of thunder breathing and incorporating the airborne aspects of your 9th form Hattori. Minato comments and taps his chin. He had been pondering the technique for some time. He was mostly relying on his memories of Guy and his use of accelerated movements to act quickly while in the air. He wanted something that he could use to redirect his focus even while he wasn't grounded. The other techniques that brought him into the air had to start on the ground after all. That's incredible. I don't think I've seen someone figure out a style that worked for them that quickly. Hattori whistles in appreciation. You are some kind of genius, Minato, Hattori murmurs and looks at the marks along the ground. Minato felt a faint smile work over his lips. He had been called that title all his life, but he hadn't ever appreciated it until now. Hattori glances back at him and his lips twitch before he shakes his head. What are you going to call it? He asks. Minato doesn't have to ponder it. He's gazing at Hiroko as the girl practices first form again, her actions smoother than before. Storm breathing seems apt, considering it's a mix of a few breathing styles. Hattori nods in appreciation and heads to Minato to observe Hiroko's progress. She already has excelled in learning what Minato has thrown at her, and honestly, Minato would not be surprised if she turns around and learns the rest of the thunder breathing forms that much faster than before. The girl reminds him a little of himself, a little of another boy with shaggy black hair and a penchant for mischief. Shisui would love the little girl. He'd probably teach her all manner of techniques. Minato pauses and gazes at the girl again. She's blitzing through her forms as lightning dots her figure. He could already see how learning the Shunshin would benefit the girl. She had a decent amount of chakra, and if she kept up expanding and controlling her reserves. Well, it was a thought. Minato would wait just a little longer. He didn't want to overwork the girl, and he had to be careful. She was just a kid, if a fast-learning one. Hiroko finished the second form with a grin on her normally docile features. She was excited, Minato noted. She smiled easier now, all of the kids did. His eyes shift to the rest of them. Giyu is being guided onto the water by Kyojuro and Sabito, while Naruto works with Mikomo on some stretches. Sabito has managed to pull ahead even further and is trying to get Kyojuro to spar with him on the water. They are laughing, happy. None of them look sad or have traces of negative emotions around them. Compared to when they had been attacked by the demons, Minato calls it an improvement. Well, now that you have a form, how about we test it out for real? Hattori calls. Minato glances back and his brow furrows. You mean on a demon? He asks. He doesn't want to, but at the same time, he is going to have to fight at some point. He can't grow complacent. Hattori nods and gestures up at the sun. It's midday now, around the time that Sakanji should be coming back. We can eat lunch and then head out. Sakanji will be here to watch the kids and you, and I can get your first taste of a mission, Hattori offers. Minato thinks it over. He's not inclined to leave Naruto alone after what happened at Jigoro's place. Then again, the kids have training now and they aren't helpless. Naruto also has several markings for Hirishin on his person, along with the markings that Minato asked to place on Hiroko and Kyojuro. If anything happened, they knew how to call for him. Very well. Minato agrees with a slight grimace. Hattori reaches over and Minato stills as the boy claps his shoulder and then passes him to go and stop Sabito from dragging Kyojuro into the pond. Kyojuro was just laughing as Sabito rushed him, his hair pasted to his forehead from the amount of water being splashed around. Minato turned and caught sight of Hattori landing on the surface of the water and tugging Sabito over his shoulder. The boy yelped and went flying. He had to twist to not land badly. Giyu was hoisted up from where he had been steadily sinking in the water with its sloshing movements. That was another thing that had occurred. Sakanji and Hitori had both taken up learning with the rest of the kids so they could utilize the small amounts of chakra they had. Both had the same levels as Mikomo, but they had more practice in utilizing similar forces and grasped both water walking and tree climbing rather quickly. Hitori had enjoyed sparring on the water with Minato the first time he figured it out, and ever since he could hardly stop picking on the kids when they were practicing. Hitori's laughter rang out as Sabito lunged back at him. Soon Giyu was dragged into the fight by his angry friend, and Kyojuro stepped in to make sure Giyu was alright. "Get Hitori, charge!" Naruto hollers and lunges. There's hardly enough space on the small pond for all of them, but it proves to be excellent practice as the water splashes. Naruto leaps for Hitori's shoulders like a monkey but gets gently tossed to the side. Naruto catches himself and huffs. Hiroko drops between Kyojuro and Hitori in a flicker of lightning, bringing her arm down to block a kick as her green eyes twinkle with mischief. "I got you, Hitori-sensei," Hiroko calls. Hitori smirks. Following Hiroko is Mikomo, the girl rounding on her fellow students as she takes Sabito down with a neat flip over his head and a wink sent his way. "I guess it's the girls and I versus the rest of you," Hitori teases. "I think I have the upper hand here." Naruto lets out a sharp and wounded sound, though it's all posturing, and lunges with Kyojuro at Mikomo. "We can handle Mikomo ne," Naruto hollers. Sabito and Giyu are quick to disengage and go for Hiroko while Naruto hollers over his shoulder. "To-san, help!" He cries and goes down under a swift but careful kick from Mikomo. The girl dances around Kyojuro's strikes with ease as she giggles behind her sleeve. Minato smirks and Hitori suddenly finds himself on the defensive as a yellow flash slams into him from above. The kids are sparring below them, but Minato makes sure to incorporate them in his attacks on Hitori as the Hashira does the same for the girls. There's laughter all around. Sakanji comes back to find a pile of limbs in his front room. He raises a brow behind his mask. He can pick out Hitori and Minato at the bottom, Naruto tucked into his father's right side. Hiroko is curled between the Hashira with Kyojuro laying across them both. Sabito is tucked next to Giyu and tangled in the mess of legs below. Mikomo lays on top of the whole pile, her face tucked against Naruto's side while her feet edge near Sabito's annoyed but tired face. "Welcome back, Urokodaki-sensei," Mikomo calls as she sees him enter. A soft smile blankets her features. Urokodaki inclines his head and makes his way around to the two adults. Minato is grinning while Hitori looks reluctantly amused as they both peer at Sakanji. It's obvious that they have been in this position for some time, likely right after they finished training for the day. Hitori's Haori has been accosted by Hiroko and the girl is fast asleep with her head on Minato's shoulder. Mikomo somehow had the girl's hand clutched in her own. Naruto is asleep and Kyojuro is trying to stay awake from his position, but he keeps slumping over every time his bright eyes blink awake. Sabito is awake but Giyu is asleep next to him, content and wrapped in a white coat. A day ago, Sakanji wouldn't have known of the article, but the day prior Minato had unsealed his shinobi attire to try and get an idea of the changes he would make to his Demon Slayer uniform. Sakanji had seen the coat with the red kanji for 4th Hokage embroidered on the back then. Minato had explained what the coat was then with a sad smile on his face. Since then, the kids had tossed the cloak around among them. Minato glances at the kids and Sakanji walks around the pile. Who wants salmon for dinner? He asks and holds up his catch. Those that are awake chorus yes, while those who are asleep remain as they are. He sets to work with the food only to soon be joined by his adult patrons. Minato and Hattori had somehow left the pile without jostling the kids and were now aiding Sakanji in making food. I'm going to take Minato on a hunt tonight. Would you be alright watching the kids? Hattori asks as he sets to work washing the rice. Minato takes up beside him and helps Sakanji prepare the fish calmly. I can manage on my own. I suppose you wish to test out your new forms? Sakanji asks Minato, shifting his head to the side. Minato nods and starts to grab dishes for the kids despite the fact food will take some time to get ready. Hattori figures it would be best. The week we have is almost up and I would like to jump into preparing for the final selection. Sakanji nods. The adults settle into silence as they prepare. At one point Minato leaves and starts carting the children off to a more suitable place to nap in, resulting in tired grumbles and shifting limbs. Sabito remains awake while Makomo walks with a tired Hiroko to their room to rest. Naruto falls asleep next to Giyu and Kyojuro in their shared room. Once Sabito is the only one left, the boy takes up a seat at the table and watches the Hashira move. His eyes focus mostly on Minato. Minato comes to sit next to him and once he does he pulls out a sealing scroll. How about a game, Sabito-kun? Minato asks and the scroll summons a board with a puff of smoke. Sabito raises a brow as he gazes at the board but shrugs. Whatever, he mutters and then watches Minato set up the shogi board. He's quiet all the while and he explains the premise to Sabito. Once the boy is up to speed, Minato starts a game. It's simple enough and Sabito grasps the strategy aspect well. His eyes flit over the pieces but he stalls when he meets a stalemate. Ah, checkmate Sabito-kun, Minato hums. Sabito raises his gaze and his lips twist into a frown. Again, he demands. Minato nods and resets the board. They start again. It goes much the same. Minato just proves to be several steps ahead of Sabito, but each time the boy lasts longer and longer as he grasps more of the game and what he can do to not get trapped. They go through several games before Hattori comes over and asks to take Sabito's place. At this point, the boy has a dozen losses under his belt and just nods sharply and slides to the side. He stays focused on the board even when he leaves. He watches as Hattori starts to play against Minato. The first match ends in Minato's favor, along with the second. It's the third match where Minato stalls, eyes wide, and realizes that Hattori has worked him into a corner. He raises his blue eyes to the wind Hashira but finds him smiling contentedly. They start again. It takes them forever and Sabito is watching them make their moves with careful and calculated precision. It's like watching two generals duke it out across a field and Sabito can't help but watch them intently. Sakanji joins as Minato wins the match. His mask is turned to the board as Minato resets the pieces again. The matches between Hashira and Shinobi took so much longer than the matches between Sabito and Minato did. There's a lull as Hattori pulls an odd move. Minato eyes the piece and then he allows Hattori to take it by shifting his king instead. Why did you move that way? Sabito suddenly asks. His brow is furrowed as he gazes at the piece Hattori has just removed. Minato shifts and opens his mouth to explain but Sakonji's voice calls over his. To protect the king. Sometimes you have to be several moves ahead in a game like this to ensure victory. Sabito glances from Sakanji to Minato, his eyes registering the board. He had been moving pieces at the moment, not paying attention to what was happening on the board. Reading ahead? Planning before you strike? It was like Sakonji's teaching for water breathing. Sabito zeroes in again. Minato and Hattori are staring at the board intently and won't make their moves. He reads the board. He's focusing not just on the current placement of the pieces but also on where the pieces can go. His eyes widen a fraction. He can see them playing out, watch as the choices made affect the board and evolve into something more. Minato wins this round. They go again. This time Sabito takes Hattori's side with the Hashira lingering next to him. He took it slow and thought each move through. Minato gives him a kind and endearing smile. It makes something warm run through him, but he stubbornly shoves it down. He just needs to master this. What sort of man would he be if he didn't? He loses, but this time he feels much better when he starts again. He can do this. He can beat the Hashira. They keep at it until it's time for dinner. They eat, but the whole time Sabito is eyeing the board, thinking of new strategies and ideas. When dinner finishes he tries to ask for another match, but Minato gives him a sad smile. Sorry, I will be leaving with Hattori for patrol. I'm sure one of the others would play you. Minato offers and glances at the other kids. Sabito looks behind him and winces at the idea. The only person who probably knows how to play is Kyojuro and he doesn't want to. Hiroko steps over, a smile on her features as she gestures to the board. I'll play. Gigi showed me how, she offers. Sabito blinks but nods. He's okay with Hiroko, if a bit wary because of how close the girl is to Mikomo. He doesn't see the smile crossing Hattori and Minato's faces or hear the pleased hum from Urokodaki. He's too focused on the game at hand to even notice as Minato leaves into the night with Hattori. They travel through the forest, their steps soundless even on the branches as they sprint over the tops of the underbrush. Minato keeps his chakra unleashed so he can get the hang of feeling for demons. Hattori has a lead for a demon nearby that his crow told them about. It was a 2-hour journey, normally by foot, but they could cut it down to half an hour running the way they were. They were close to arriving, a haze of lanterns peeking through the trees. The two dropped to take the road instead and worked their way into the small village. It was quiet with the occasional villager making their way back home. Minato got close to his escort while he held the handle of his sword. The Nichiren sword was the same training sword that Minato was given by Shinjiro. It served him well enough even if it wasn't the best sword for him. That would come after the finale selection was finished. Minato expanded his senses as they entered the village. There was a hum of extra yang chakra in the air and that aided him in finding the demon quickly. Hattori seemed to have the same sixth sense as Shinjiro and the other Hashira as he located the demon around the same time. They both worked to surround the demon. Minato was meant to handle it mostly on his own so he could get used to the feeling. It wasn't much different from fighting a person, but these people just so happened to be flesh-eating monsters. It made it easier to take care of them, Minato found. The demon in question was as feral as the original ones Minato had run into, but this one appeared mostly human if not for the lack of eyes and the gaping mouth. Minato stepped in line with it as it rounded on him. The demon snarled and bolted for him. Without a word, Minato took up his blade and blitzed ahead. Fire trailed in his wake and he rounded, leapt, and snapped the blade cleanly through the demon's head as the demon lunged for him. The body was already vanishing by the time it hit the floor. Minato raised his gaze to Hattori and the wind Hashira nodded before gesturing to his crow. It seemed like one demon wasn't enough for tonight. Minato was going to have an interesting time. They spent the whole night chasing demons. Minato would have been worried for the kids had he not been focused on the task at hand. He saved several people and the demons that fell to him hardly got a word in before they fell as a pile of ashes. When Minato finally finished out the night, Hattori had only taken care of one demon and left the rest for Minato. He was careful not to let anyone get hurt and focused on saving people while Minato handled the demons. There weren't many demons around, only a dozen or so, and they only ran into more when they traveled further and further away from their original village. Hattori finally called it as the sun was beginning to rise. He grinned at Minato and offered him small words of congratulations. "I think that's enough proof that I'm not needed here. I can return to Masechika and Hatsuharu today," Hattori tells him as Minato prepares to go back. Minato pauses, eyes shifting over the man. "You'll take care then?" Minato asks. Hattori's smirk softens into a smile. He holds out his hand and when Minato grasps it they both flicker into place in Sakonji's living room. "I can handle myself, Minato. You just take care of those kids," he says and winks before he goes to grab his things. He takes Minato up on his offer to take him to the master's mansion, eliminating a good amount of travel time. Minato comes back to find the kids awake and moving. Sakonji greets him and tells him to get some rest before the day begins. It's a good start. It's better than Minato ever imagined. He feels like nothing can stop him. Chapter 18. Flurry of time and skill. 2 weeks pass in a blur. Minato goes out with Sakonji some nights and leaves the girls to watch over the kids as they hunt down demons. By the end of the 2 weeks, Sakonji lets Minato go on his own, if only because Makomo gets a cold. Kyojuro is no longer with the group, having returned to his family soon after Hattori left. Hiroko remained with them, teaching Naruto whenever she and Makomo weren't training for the final selection. There's a heavy air around the group but Minato dissipates it with careful practice every time the subject is brought up. Hiroko won't let go of the idea that she is going to get to the final selection. She had 2 more of the thunder breathing forms down. That leaves her with nothing else for that breathing style. She focuses on storm breathing instead. Minato can see how the style benefits her. She just meshes with the mixed ideas better. The only breathing style that would probably work even better is wind breathing but Hattori hadn't been able to entice the young blonde enough. He still sent scrolls with detailed instructions for the katas for wind breathing. He wanted Hiroko and the others to practice. Having something like that under their belt would only help them in the long run. Giyu had started to take interest in storm breathing too. He was dragged under Naruto and Hiroko's wings as they set to teach him as much as they could. He struggled a little with the fluidity at first but soon enough the forms helped him not only branch out but also master more water-breathing forms. Sakonji was incredibly impressed by the difference that was made. The boys had also managed to increase their strength, dexterity, and their tactical thinking. Minato took to teaching all of the kids how to play shogi just so they could start training their minds, and out of all the kids, it was obvious who excelled. Makomo had a knack for tactics. She swept the floor with Sabito the first time she played and had even managed to win against Minato once. She found herself struggling though and had since sought out every available opportunity to challenge him in the attempt to get another win. Hiroko wasn't far behind, but the insight just seemed to click with Sabito where it didn't with her. She was excellent at backing him up though and worked well when they both held one side of the board with two other kids on the other side. Sakanji had also joined in. Minato wasn't ashamed to admit he lost a fair amount of matches against the man. He wasn't afraid to admit he was surprised and excited at the prospect of facing such an opponent. Minato had also picked up his Rasengan training. He had to do it in the morning while the kids were occupied because of how dangerous it was, but he was making progress. So far, the easiest element for him to incorporate had been lightning, but even then, something felt like it was missing. Minato wasn't sure and he struggled against the hurdle. Other than those significant events, not much had occurred. Minato was planning on returning to the Rengoku estate, probably with a good amount of the kids in tow, while Sakanji took up training Makomo in earnest. The girl was adept at water walking, throwing kunai, and taijutsu, and even had the henge technique under her belt. Minato had enjoyed watching the aftermath of her ability as Makomo pranked the boys while Hiroko watched. It was hilarious. Briefly, Minato worried about the implications when Makomo and Kyojuro joined forces, but that thought was dismissed with Kyojuro's return home. Now Sabito was always wary and ready to dispel any and all illusionary techniques after being pranked one too many times. The only ground rules for the technique were that the kids couldn't henge to look like an adult, because of the implications and dangers of that. Otherwise, everyone else was fair game. Currently, Minato was trying to teach Naruto the henge technique. It wasn't going the best even with Naruto's improved chakra control. "I think that's enough for today, Naruto," Minato spoke up after the fifth failed attempt at the henge. Naruto grumbled, glaring down at his feet as the smoke puffed and released the henge of his father. It wasn't terrible per se, just not perfect. Minato leaned down to ruffle his son's hair, earning a small smile. Naruto was frustrated with his lack of progress in the jutsu area. Minato hadn't wanted to teach the kid much more, but well, it seemed like he would have to. Kushina had relayed to Minato how academy students were taught elemental clones in Uzushio due to their large reserves. Perhaps something similar would be good for Naruto. Genjutsu was likely going to be impossible for the poor kid unless he found a way to use seals for it. Minato hadn't ever tried, but Kushina was adept with that aspect of seals and had shown him a few designs when they were younger. "How about I teach you a different technique?" Minato asks. Naruto's eyes light up, but there is an edge to him. Minato's gaze softens and he boops his son's nose fondly. Naruto pouts and narrows his eyes on the offending finger. "This one I'm sure you can handle. Here, copy my hand signs." Minato offered and held up his hands. Naruto focused on them, holding his hands to mimic. He had to correct a few fingers, but once he got one down, Minato showed him the rest. It was a simple enough jutsu to complete. Minato had gotten to the point where he only needed one seal for it. "Here, now, the name is Shadow Clone, got that?" Minato told his son. Naruto nodded, stepping back. He practiced the series of hand signs at least 10 times before Minato told him to add chakra. It was something that Minato insisted on no matter the technique so that Naruto would get the hang of it. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Naruto calls. There's a puff of smoke and Minato's eyes widen. Next to Naruto stands a solid copy of himself. The blonde turns and his blue eyes light up considerably as he gazes at the fully functional clone. Immediately the two jump into the air with pumped fists. "I did it!" They holler, their cheer bringing a bright smile to Minato's face. He gazes at his son and hauls him and the copy into a hug. "Amazing Naruto, simply amazing." He praises as pride wells inside of him. He had worried that even with Naruto's reserves that the boy would struggle with this technique, but it turned out that his worries were unfounded. His son was remarkable, Kyuubi chakra or not. Naruto grins and both he and the copy circle their father in a tight embrace. They are soon wiggling from his grasp as both rush over to tell the rest of the training kids what he did. The surprise from them is endearing and Hiroko takes a moment to ruffle Naruto's hair proudly. He cheers while Makomo stares at the copy with a tilted head. "Naruto, you should also know something about the clones," Minato calls out. His son turns and Minato winks as he picks up the clone and orders his son to stay put. He walks around the house as the kids stare after him. He sets the clone down and whispers in his ear. They are going to get ramen to celebrate. The clone's eyes light up and he is about to shout, but Minato holds a finger to his lips and tells the clone to dispel. The clone does as it's told with puffed cheeks. On the other side of the house Naruto cheers. "Ramen." "Wait," his voice carries and Minato walks around the house with a soft smile. Naruto turns to him with wide eyes and the other kids are eyeing him. Makomo is casting a gaze between them. She's realized what happened. "To-san, I know what happened." Naruto cheers as his eyes shine. Minato nods and reaches over to ruffle his hair. The basic clone is just an illusionary clone, but the shadow clone can relay memories and take a hit. It's solid enough and a good tool in a high-stress situation. Minato tells his son and glances at the others. "I would teach you guys, but this clone uses a lot of chakra. Naruto has large reserves due to his mother's bloodline, but perhaps later on I can teach you the technique when your reserves have grown." Makomo nods, her gaze softening as she calmly praises Naruto. Sabito looks a little put out but nods his head while Giyu gazes at Naruto in wonder. "Well, I promised ramen, so I'm going to head out to get it. In the meantime, how about you all prepare the table and get washed up?" Minato offers. Makomo nods and gathers the others. Surprisingly, Giyu stays behind as the gaggle of children make their way inside. Minato casts a questioning glance at the boy and he flushes red. "See, could I join you?" he asks, looking down. Minato can see how unsure he is, stress and unsureness plaguing him. It would be cute if it didn't worry Minato a little bit. He's bundled in the bright red haori again. Giyu had been holding onto Minato's coat for a good while, so the red haori hadn't appeared for some time. Now that the coat had been accosted by Naruto again, the haori was back. "Yes, I would love the company, Giyu-kun." Minato offers and extends his hand. The 7-year-old nods and takes the hand. His cheeks are still flushed but he looks happy. Minato then crouches down, pointing to his back. "I was planning on running there. If you want, I can carry you instead of you having to run." Minato offers with a gentle smile. Giyu's eyes go wide. Minato wonders if he pushed too hard for a moment, and he tenses when Giyu's eyes start to water. Giyu nods though, allowing Minato to pull him onto his back before they set out. Minato makes sure the kid is settled before he takes off. Small sad noises are coming from his back. Minato isn't sure what made the kid cry this time, but it seems like Giyu is okay not talking about it. If you want to talk, I'm here, okay. And it's okay to cry. I don't mind at all, Giyu-kun. Minato murmurs. He's noticed just how easily the boy cries. It wasn't apparent when they first met, but the past 3 weeks have shown Minato that this little boy experiences emotions in surges. Many would call him a crybaby, but Minato won't. The title has too many negative connotations. Honestly, Minato is glad that Giyu is allowing his emotions rather than hiding them. Sabito hides them. He's getting better about being so toxic about it, but Minato understands that he doesn't know better. Seeing how easily Minato allows the kids to cry and express themselves has helped him. Giyu has opened up so much more than even Sabito has to Minato. Sakanji had told him the barest amount of his students' pasts. Sabito was a lone child whose family was killed by demons. Makomo was much the same. Giyu used to have a sister. Now it was just him. There's a hitch in his breath and Giyu grips Minato's shoulders tightly. He buried his face in Minato's neck. Minato slows his pace, allowing the boy some time. Sutako ne used to carry me like this. Giyu murmurs. His voice is muffled, but Minato hears him anyway. The blonde hums gently, offering a bit of his chakra to give the boy some comfort. It's warm and Giyu snuggles closer. His red haori flickers and bounces in and out of Minato's vision. She was your older sister? Minato asks gently. Giyu nods. He grips Minato again and his inhale is riddled with a sob. She died protecting me. He whispers. He's clutching his haori tighter to him too, giving Minato enough of an idea of whom it belonged to. It was much too big for Giyu. Another shaky gasp. There's a sound of pain and Minato halts in his tracks as Giyu cries with renewed vigor. He's sobbing now, his shoulders shaking as he desperately claws at Minato's shoulders. Minato shifts and in a move that surprises the kid, he has Giyu swapped around to his front and he's sitting on the ground. Twigs are digging into him but Minato doesn't mind. He's holding Giyu close. It's okay. You can let it out, Giyu. Minato murmurs and reaches up to run a hand through Giyu's hair. The boy lets out an aborted sound and then he's taking fistfuls of Minato's uniform as he spasms. His cries echo in the woods, muffled though they are against Minato's clothes. He cries and Minato holds him gently, murmuring soft reassurances. They return with ramen to find the kids are set up. Giyu is still huddled against Minato's side, his haori drawn around him in a way that makes him look far too small. His eyes are red and his cheeks are puffy but he just rests against Minato's side calmly. Minato cleaned his face as much as he could. He said nothing of what had happened and merely held the boy close as they approached the others. They all notice that something happened but even Sabito doesn't comment. Instead, Sabito ends up pressing against his friend's side and offering him bits of sushi that they had grabbed along with the ramen. Naruto is cheering loudly but he constantly rambles to Giyu in such a way that the boy smiles back. It's small but the gentle words from both Makomo and Hiroko stir the boy into speaking more until he is chatting like normal with the rest of them. Sakanji arrives and almost beelines it to the boy. He reaches down and Minato almost thinks that Giyu is going to cry again when Sakanji ruffles his hair and nods to him. Giyu nods back and his face flushes, not in sadness but in joy. He's gazing at the rest of them in the ambient warmth and feels at home. When they go to bed that night Minato can hardly rest. He sets up his ceiling paper and wonders if it's going to be a long night. Giyu comes by in the middle of the night, telling him about a nightmare. Minato settles into his futon with Giyu tucked against his side, exactly like Naruto would. They settle in and somehow Giyu isn't the only one with pleasant dreams. No, Minato dreams of his wife and the day they were married. It's the best sleep he's had since he arrived in this world. Sakanji sees them off when they finally head to the Rengoku estate. Makomo is the only child remaining with him. The boys are tagging along with Minato so that Makomo can get focused training with her teacher. Minato waves her off and they all vanish in a flicker of Hirishin. The kids are relatively used to the feeling now after Minato's trips during the past 3 weeks. They arrive to find Shinjiro, Kyojuro, and Ruka waiting for them. The Hashira steps forward and greets Minato first. No one comments on the brief hug they share before the kids join together in a rambunctious chorus of greetings. Ruka's eyes are bright as she gazes at all the little faces. They end up in the kitchen for lunch and Ruka introduces herself to the rest of the group. Hiroko and Giyu in particular are besotted with the woman. Their eyes shine as she gently guides them around the kitchen and shows them how to make the meal. Sabito watches her mostly from afar, sticking next to Kyojuro and Naruto. Minato showcases his forms to Shinjiro much to the Hashira's surprise. He chuckles when he sees the set of forms that Minato has developed. He pays particular attention to the third form because of its similarities to the fifth form of flame breathing. "You have done an incredible job, Minato. It seems like the past month that you have been gone has done you well." Shinjiro offers and Minato grins. Hitori rather liked the forms. "I have 2 new ones as well, though Hiroko can't perform them just yet and I'm fleshing them out. Do you want to see it?" he offers. At Shinjiro's nod, Minato takes up a position a few feet away from the Hashira. His eyes settle and he feels the strength welling up within from total concentration. He's hardly ever out of the state these days. It's easy to hold it and it strengthens Minato in more ways than he thought possible. It reminded him of some of the training that Guy focused on, making him wonder. Storm breathing. 6th form, Storm Dragon. Minato calls and he pushes into the air with a burst of chakra. Shinjiro's eyes go wide and Minato narrows his gaze on a target across the field. He grips the handle of his blade and lightning bursts across his vision as he snaps down on the target. His path is marked by the gaping maw of a lightning dragon, the sound of crackling entering the air as Minato slices the dummy into 2. He gazes at the severed dummy and then hops back, spawning 2 clones on either side of him. The puff of smoke rises even as they both draw their blades and flicker around the space. 6th form, Myriad Eclipse. Minato calls and lunges at his target, swinging his blade down and around in an arc reminiscent of a moon. The technique sends the dummy flying when the strikes connect. Minato has seen the technique. This one is based on multiple times whenever Hayate was on his guard detail. The augmentation of the breathing styles adds a flicker of fire and wind along the blade as Minato's eyes spark. He kept the moon aspect of the strike. He wanted to hold Hayate's original name close when this technique was based on it. It just felt right. Shinjiro walks over to see what remains of the poor wooden training dummy. It's gone over the wall, leaving behind flickering flames and a tantalizing rush in the air as lightning crawls over the remains. His eyes shift to Minato as the shinobi rises, sheathing his blade with a flourish. As he clicks it into place, the 2 clones vanish. His blue eyes turn to Shinjiro and the Hashira sees a flicker of something dangerous. Sometimes, when Minato is tossing the kids around and talking gently to Hiroko, Shinjiro forgets who this man is. He forgets how dangerous Minato is underneath all the hurt and the happy facade. He forgets because Minato laughs and cries and lives like the rest of them. Things like this, a technique with enough force to tear its target into pieces, remind Shinjiro that Minato is indeed dangerous. It makes him glad that Minato is siding with them, that the man has no inclinations to become a demon. He doesn't want to think about what would happen if Minato did. Those are deadly techniques. I can see why you haven't let Hiroko use them yet. How many forms in total are you going to settle on? Shinjiro asks. Minato hums and rubs the back of his neck as he stares up at the sky. He's pondering as he looks at the clouds. Honestly, 7. I may do more, but I just feel like I need one more before I have a well-rounded arsenal. Shinjiro nods. That sounds about right. I think you have a good layout for the next 3.5 months. Minato blinks, eyes shifting over to his son. He blinks and remembers something. Naruto is turning 6 in less than a month. Shinjiro follows his line of sight. Naruto is currently helping Ruka carry laundry to hang it up. Hiroko and Kyojuro trail behind, forming a line of blonde ducklings. It's adorable. Sabito groans from inside as Giyu wins a match of shogi against him. His brow furrows and he demands a rematch even as Giyu smiles. 6, huh? If I didn't know better I'd say he was Kyojiro's age. Shinjiro comments, eyes shifting over to Minato. Minato rubs the back of his neck and chuckles. Naruto grows quickly due to the chakra in his system. He has to consume more too, which I'm sure you can relate to based on how much the kids have to consume in their training. If I keep up with it, then he will reach maturity much faster than the others. Shinjiro nods. Are all chakra users that way? He presses a little further. Minato shakes his head and comes to stand next to the Hashira. Most don't have enough chakra in their system for it to affect them until they are already grown. Naruto is an Uzumaki, and Uzumaki have a plethora of chakra when they are young. Kushina reached maturity 2 years before her class, Minato tells him. He thinks back on it and has to smile. It's easier to talk about Kushina now. The hurt and pain from all those weeks ago are still there, but it's much easier when he has Naruto, Kyojuro, Hiroko, Giyu, and Sabito to look after. Oh, he's adopted them all. Kushina would laugh at him, but she'd approve more than anyone else. Minato is sure that she would also approve of the friends he's made. She and Hattori would get along. That's good to know. Slayers tend to mature faster too. I'm not sure why, though. It has been theorized in the past that our breathing techniques speed up the process. It's one of the reasons why children still survive against demons when they honestly should not be able to. Shinjiro pipes up. Minato nods. He had wondered as much, but after spending time with multiple groups of Demon Slayer kids, he can safely say that Kyojuro isn't the only child with a strange growth. It was a lot like the difference between a child from a shinobi family and a civilian. The two adults approached the porch as Ruka smiled at the kids. She was thankful for the help and even happier with the laughter filling her home. Hiroko and Kyojuro could hardly stop staring at her stomach, wonder and adoration in their gazes. Minato had worried. Hiroko still has nightmares about her mother some days, but just like with Kushina, Hiroko has learned to focus on other things when she's feeling pained. The little boy growing in Ruka's stomach is one such distraction. Minato removes his shoes and enters the home to see Sabito beat Giyu. He's fuming at the boy though, ranting about a move that Giyu made that shut down the whole game. Giyu stares blankly at him before shrugging and asking for another round. He's calmer now. There are still bouts of crying, but they are getting fewer and fewer by the day as Giyu settles into their happy group. He sticks mostly with Hiroko these days when Sabito is focused elsewhere, but the two are still good friends. "Minato, would you like me to run a bath?" Ruka calls from behind them and Minato glances over his shoulder to see her walking up. She's pointedly looking at the boys, who for lack of a better term, are dirty. They normally head into town to bathe at least twice a week. It's been almost a week since the last trip. Minato nods and thanks her in advance. She smiles and walks past him. Hiroko ends up joining her while Naruto and Kyojuro head to the other two boys. "Sakanji wanted you to teach them some of the flame-breathing forms if you were up for it," Minato comments as the boys split into two teams. Naruto and Sabito on one side, Giyu and Kyojuro on the other. The teammates take turns moving pieces and work together to try and topple the other side. Despite his age, Naruto has picked up a good amount of the game and his eyes spark as he makes unpredictable moves that work more often than not. Sabito has grown used to working with the boy and despite the unconventional nature of their teamwork, they pull a win more than once. Shinjiro watches aptly as he replies, "I can manage so long as you can help. I would not mind picking up some shinobi training as well." Kyojuro was excited to show me what he learned. Shinjiro casts a glance at the elder blonde and gets a sheepish grin in response. He turns back to the board to watch the boys. Shinjiro would occasionally play with Kyojuro, but he had never imagined his son actively seeking to play something as simple as shogi. Kyojuro was often more inclined to the physical aspects of training. Then again, after each match, Minato would calmly teach the kids what their moves would mean outside of the board. He was teaching them strategy and planning in such a way that it garnered their attention. Minato proved to be a great teacher. It was just too bad that he couldn't focus on just teaching the kids. Then again, the man also proved to be excellent at multitasking from what Shinjiro had gathered. Minato drops next to the board to help Giyu out. This earns him a smile and Giyu snatches a piece from the other side of the board. Naruto huffs at his father and soon Minato has to dodge both his and Sabito's furious tackles. Minato goes down and suddenly Kyojuro calls for a dog pile. Shinjiro watches with a raised brow as the kids pile onto Minato. Even Giyu joins in, though he calmly tucks against Minato's side rather than jumping on top of the shinobi. There's an affronted sound and Shinjiro turns to see Ruka and Hiroko have come back. Hiroko rushes over, lightning almost flickering at her feet and she lunges. From his spot on the top of the pile, Kyojuro lets out a yelp and suddenly Hiroko is piled on his front. Sabito grunts below them and Naruto giggles as his chains hold the bodies up off of him. Minato laughs below them, the sound mildly breathless as Hiroko peers down at him, past Kyojuro's shoulder. Kyojuro goes bright red as her hair falls over his face. "Minato Oji, you have been subdued." She giggles, her hair falling everywhere. It's out of its signature braid and hanging loosely around her. Shinjiro swore it wasn't that long before, but well, it was the first time he's seen it down. Kyojuro sputters and tries to push the hair aside but ends up sneezing instead. Hiroko yelps and the two go tumbling. She rolls to right herself and then gets smooshed under Kyojuro when he too rolls. Sabito groans but pulls away and Naruto laughs from his spot on his father. Kyojuro slumps between Hiroko and Sabito as the two laugh. Ruka laughs softly behind him, the sound like bells to Shinjiro as he turns to his wife. She's smiling at the gaggle of kids and their wayward uncle, her aura so soft and welcoming. It makes Shinjiro's heart pang fondly. He loves her laugh. Hiroko-chan, let's get you into the bath. Minato, Shinjiro, could you handle the boys? Ruka asks. Hiroko sits up and nods, springing up with a flourish. She takes a neat little leap over the pile, a pulse at her feet. It must be chakra, Shinjiro thinks. She follows Ruka again after grabbing a scroll from Minato, likely with her clothes. The two vanished again and Shinjiro ordered the boys to get set up for dinner. The girls would arrive to see the table set and the boys were all herded into the baths. Minato takes to help Naruto. The other boys handle themselves well enough that Shinjiro just has to show them around before they go into the bath. He pauses when he sees Minato. The winding scar along his torso is prominent in the water, even with the steam. Naruto is happily swimming around and grinning as he makes his laps around the other boys. The rest of them aren't as intrigued by the scar, though Sabito still eyes it ever so often. It's almost like they've seen it before. Minato catches his gaze and gives him a wry smile. Shinjiro sits next to him in the bath as the boys have their fun, making sure to get their hair. Naruto is the only one with short hair after all and he makes sure to help as much as he can when he can only stand up on the bench. I'm sure you are wondering about this? Minato asks once the boys are distracted. Well, all but Sabito. He's washing Gyu's hair in a practiced manner but his attention is on them. It's quite the scar, even if it's faded, Shinjiro comments, eyeing the mark. At one point the injury would have covered a good half of Minato's body. It's a wonder he survived. Minato's eyes shift, almost as though he is reliving the moment it happened. The night Naruto was born someone attacked my home. They were after the powerful chakra that his mother contained, the same chakra you sensed from me before. They removed it from her in an attempt to turn it against my home and steal it for themselves. Minato offers and he takes a deep and shuddering breath. Shinjiro doesn't comment. He waits with bated breath for Minato to continue. Perhaps being with Sakanji and Hattori had been good for the man if he was willing to open up about something incredibly personal. Normally when this chakra is removed from a person it's enough to kill them. Kushina was made of tougher stuff. She survived after I pushed the enemy back. When it came down to it I realized I had to seal the chakra away again or it would destroy what I held dear, Minato murmurs. His eyes are incredibly distant now. I sealed half of the force in myself, and half in my son, he reveals, his voice barely above a whisper. Shinjiro's eyes widen. His gaze darts to Naruto. The boy is laughing and hanging off Gyu's shoulders like a monkey even though Sabito is scolding him. The chakra didn't want to be sealed. It lashed out, and well, Kushina was weak. I ensured she was safe and stopped it from hurting Naruto. It took a good amount of my side, but you want to know something? That very same being that wanted to be free from me didn't want to die. So it healed the very wound it tried to kill me with, Minato says and shakes his head. He comes back to the present when Shinjiro sets a hand on his shoulder. Kushina didn't want me to seal it into Naruto, but the only other option was her and that would have killed her. I couldn't take the chance, Minato told him, pain in his voice. It became more obvious the longer that Shinjiro looked at the man that he wasn't happy with his choice. Minato looks back at his son and lets out a pained laugh. That's the main reason I'm so careful with Naruto. This chakra we hold inside of us is a double-edged sword. If we aren't careful, all the power it offers can consume us. I've managed to make an agreement with mine, but Naruto doesn't even know. Kushina wanted him to have a normal childhood, so we did everything we could to make that happen. They both watch Naruto go tumbling. A large splash washes over the other boys, but they are all smiling together. Minato's gaze softens and his smile settles into something so incredibly fond that Shinjiro mimics it. He keeps his hand on Minato's shoulder. The look Minato casts him tells him it's appreciated. I tilde 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 I. Drabble Hiroko and Ruka. Ruka helps Hiroko wash her hair. Her fingers make quick work of cleaning the strands and Hiroko helps her wash her hair in turn. It's something so similar to what she did with Ka-san that it makes her feel a pang in her chest. Her eyes burn and Ruka notices, but she just offers her a gentle hug. Hiroko settles into the warm embrace, thinking of Ka-san and how kind Ruka is. Ka-san and Ruka would have loved each other. Hiroko, do you want me to put your hair up? Ruka asks softly. She's speaking gently from where they are situated in the kitchen, letting their hair dry. Hiroko nods, not trusting her voice. She's lost in her thoughts and emotions. She had a Ka-san. As much as Ruka reminds her of Ka-san, she's not Hiroko's Ka-san. She can be close. She can be someone that Hiroko looks to for guidance in a way that she can't look to Minato. And for all that Ruka can't be her Ka-san because Hiroko had one, Minato, well, she doesn't know how he feels, but somewhere in her mind she can only see Minato when she thinks, to-san. Drabble be my friend. He isn't sure how it happened. He wasn't kind to kids. They didn't like him, found him dangerous. He didn't hurt them, but that didn't mean he was nice. This one though, this one was different. Her glimmering golden eyes watched him as her feet kicked on the branch she sat on. She was staring down at him with those gleaming eyes. Her lips settled into a smile not befitting a monster like him. You should leave, he says gruffly. He doesn't want to risk her getting hurt by staying near him. It's dangerous here. That man would hurt her. Either that or he would send one of the others after her. She's pretty enough for one of them to warrant their interest, despite being young. Actually, he isn't even sure how old she is. She looks young, but not so young she can't handle herself. He had watched her stab a knife through a man's throat when he tried to take advantage of her. He had also stepped in and tore the man apart, but even after his vicious actions, the girl continued to follow him. Why? She asks, tilting her head. She giggles. I think you'd make a good friend, she says happily. He wants to growl at her. He does. She doesn't even blink. I'm a monster kid, I'm not safe, he snaps at her. She huffs and rolls her eyes. He's never met a brat with this much sass before. You helped me with that guy. He's a real monster, she says and waves her hand dismissively. She then hops off the branch. He feels an echo of something in his chest. Something tight and hazy as she falls. It urges him to catch her, to not let her get hurt. He hasn't felt this before, hasn't felt this push to do something or to keep someone safe. Wings burst out of her back and she flutters next to him. She's barely at his waist, and when she looks up at him her blue hair falls over her eyes. Her gleaming red eyes with slit pupils. Besides, you aren't the only monster here. Chapter 19. Home is where the heart is. Naruto, be more careful, Minato starts, but it's cut off as the boy goes tumbling over Hiroko. The two drop into the water. Hiroko sputters, her hair pasted to her forehead while her eyes narrow on the little boy who had just dropped on top of her. Naruto-kun, you have to watch where you are going. Hiroko comments and sighs as she lifts herself out of the water. Naruto gives her a sheepish look as he scrambles to get off of her. She pulls him up with her and grimaces at her clothes. She doesn't like getting wet. Minato has noticed. Minato walks over and gently flicks Naruto's nose as he lightly scolds his son for his careless actions. Naruto had been goofing around while climbing trees and he had lost focus. Hiroko had gotten an armful of blonde in response. Naruto frowns but nods, apologizing to Hiroko. Minato ruffles his hair and he relaxes into the touch while Minato glances at Hiroko. She pulls her hair around to wring it out. She had been attempting the fifth form for thunder breathing, but she had fallen so many times trying to get into the air that Minato had her practice it above water to lessen her scrapes and bruises. She had gotten much better and hadn't fallen into the water while practicing her katas for over a week. Naruto had ruined that streak. Hiroko hums and ruffles his hair. Apology accepted. Now, I'm going to go dry off, Hiroko says and smiles at the boy. This earns her a returned grin before she is making her way to the house. Sabito watches her, snickering. He opens his mouth but he gets one dangerous smile from the girl and his mouth snaps shut. He looks over at Giyu but the boy is distractedly watching Ruka hang clothes. Kyojuro even stops practicing his forms next to his father, looking at Minato. Minato waves them off. It's all right, just a training mishap, Minato tells them and makes his way over to the two Rengoku slayers. Shinjiro is showing Kyojuro the fifth form too. The boy is grasping the katas well enough. Shinjiro hums and steps back to Minato. Hiroko is unharmed then? He asks. Minato nods and reaches out with his chakra. Much like Naruto, Hiroko sends him a pulse. There's an edge to it, likely out of embarrassment and frustration, but Minato can understand her sentiments. Embarrassed and a little annoyed at her lack of progress the last week. She's worked up to this form but she's stalled. I don't think she realizes just how fast she's grasping all these concepts, Minato informs the man. His eyes shift over the rest of the kids. I don't think any of them do. It's only been 3 weeks, Minato mutters. His eyes are taking in Kyojiru's strong strikes, Naruto's improved chakra control, and Sabito and Giyu's improved water-breathing forms. They've been at the Rengoku estate for a little less than 3 weeks now. Hiroko has gone back to Jigoro only a handful of days, and only to showcase her progress. Jigoro had begrudgingly agreed that she could go to the final selection after seeing her progress in the forms. Giyu and Sabito have both proved to thrive in other environments just as well as they did at Urokodaki's estate. Mikomo was also progressing well now that she did not have to watch the boys constantly. Sakanji had sent them enough letters that Minato had a good idea of how far the girl had come. It's getting closer to your son's birthday too, Shinjiro reminds him. Minato nods and his attention focuses on his son. Naruto is watching for Hiroko. He looks worried when she finally returns, offering sincere apologies over and over. She softens when he begs her for forgiveness again and she tells him she will if he hugs her. He immediately lunges into her arms and she laughs as she holds him close. The two are closer now. Minato had wondered how they would mesh together, but the few days when Hiroko returned to the Thunder Estate had left Naruto floundering. Only Kyojuro could drag him out of his pouting, and that was after a fair amount of coaxing. Somehow the blonde had become attached to his Nei-chan. In a few days, it will be here. Minato comments and hums as he watches Sabito drag Hiroko over to practice more katas. Naruto finds himself next to Ruka as he watches them both. "Did you have anything planned?" Shinjiro asks. He watches as Minato rubs the back of his head. "I have no idea. Kushina always planned these things," Minato admits and then laughs. "I'll just have to figure it out as I go." Shinjiro shakes his head fondly. The man never ceases to surprise him. "Very well. How about we head into town today to do some shopping?" Quote. Minato opens his mouth to refuse on the premise of leaving all the kids for Ruka to handle when a hand settles on his shoulder. "That's a splendid idea." The calm tone calls and Minato nearly jumps as he turns around. A hand catches his arm and he comes face to face with the twinkling eyes of Hattori. Hattori winks and looks over at Shinjiro. "You can take Minato to town, I'll handle the kids. I even brought a new friend. Shinjiro, Minato, meet my Sugako, Masechika." Hattori drops Minato's arm and steps aside to introduce the young boy standing next to him. Minato's eyes widen and he glances between Hattori and the boy before giving him his full attention. "Hello, my name is Masechika." The boy bows, barely raising his head. His eyes are bright and he has short brown hair cropped at his ears. His attention is shifting between Minato and Shinjiro and past them to the kids. He looks to be about 14. The oldest out of the group of kids. "Hello, I'm Minato." Minato offers with a kind smile. He tries to ignore the tension that rose in his shoulders when Hattori snuck up on him. He isn't even sure how that was possible. Shinjiro greets the kid next, his eyes shifting over to Hattori as the young Hashira pushes the boy toward the group. Masechika hardly gets 4 steps into the grounds before he finds the trio of blondes introducing themselves. Sabito and Giyu are more subdued, but the whole affair is rather loud. "Sugako? So you decided not to name Hasehara?" Shinjiro comments. Hattori sighs. "Hasehara demanded I name Masechika instead. He's currently on an assignment or I would have nabbed him too." Hattori hums and steps next to Minato. Sugako are successors for the Hashira. They train directly under them from the time they are named and receive specialized training under their guidance. Typically only fully fledged slayers are chosen, though exceptions have been made. Hattori informs him and glances back at the kids. Mikomo is going to be Urokodaki's Sugako as soon as those 2 boys are up to snuff. "I imagine your son will be the same, Shinjiro?" Hattori questioned, calling over his shoulder. Shinjiro gave a sound of confirmation as he came to Minato's other shoulder. Minato was watching as Masechika took to the kids. He had a gentleness in his eyes and he handled the kids well. Masechika was an older brother. "We can handle the kids as I said, so go ahead and go shop for your gathering," Hattori tells them and walks ahead. He doesn't pause even though his words have stuck Minato in place. Minato sighs and shakes his head. He looks at Shinjiro with a questioning gaze. Shinjiro chuckles at the silent accusation. "This wasn't my doing. If anything, blame Sakanji." He's the only one Hattori would listen to. Minato relents. He supposes he can see the water Hashira sending Hattori to check up on him. Minato was watching over all the kids and trying to train himself at the same time. Even with Ruka and Shinjiro, the task was a little daunting. Very well. Minato offers and decides that a small break, even just to prepare for a celebration, won't hurt. Let's get going then, he says and turns. He leaves a clone to tell the kids what's going on, and Shinjiro soon joins him as they head for the town. Now they just have to figure out what will work for a birthday party. It does not go according to plan. Then again, a few things do. Minato recalls very little about how to make a cake as they used to in Konoha, and Shinjiro has as much of an idea as he does. They grab sweets instead and find some nice gifts. Minato even finds a bracelet to put a charm on. He chooses a little fox even if it garners him a questioning look, and then sets back home with Shinjiro in tow. They teleport back because of how fast it is. They come back to the site of Hattori as he is teaching the kids. Specifically, Naruto. Naruto is standing still, eyes closed as he balances on his toes on a raised spire of rock. Hattori has gotten all the kids to calm down and take a breather. He also has Hiroko dangling from one arm upside down. She's laughing at him as he holds her up, eyeing her calmly. She grins at him and then sees Minato, and she swings up, flips around, and lands on her feet. Hattori hums as he loses the weight, his arm dropping down to his side. Hattori sprints over to them and Minato laughs and drops to his knees to catch her as she tackles him. At this point, it's tradition for one of the kids to leap at him when he arrives. He rises as she encircles his head in her arms before she grins and drops, shifting around and landing back on her feet. She launches back at Hattori as Minato and Shinjiro greet the rest of them. Naruto opens his eyes and waves, losing his balance and toppling over. Hattori catches his arm and sets him down before walking past Sabito to tap his shoulder. He then comes next to Minato. Balance training? Minato asks. At the nod he receives, Minato tilts his head. He hadn't thought to teach the kids such a thing. It's important, and the boys were upset that Hiroko was able to balance on the wall when they couldn't. Hattori informs them and chuckles as Hiroko climbs up a tree, using both chakra and her arms to launch up. She's moving quickly, faster than most children her age. When she hits the top, she's waving down at them with a cheeky smile. Naruto huffs and darts up the tree after her. Minato feels his heart leap in his chest when he sees his son high up and inches forward. He stops when he hears a voice in his head. He's awake. Naruto will be fine. Minato clenches his teeth but allows himself to relax. He gazes up at the boy and his head is filled with worried thoughts, but he knows that Kurama will keep Naruto safe if only to keep himself safe. Hiroko sees his panic and she coaxes Naruto down with her. She has practiced being high up and enjoys it enough that Minato has had to go and get her more than once. She would have been a bird in another life. Once Naruto is on the ground, Minato scoops him up and drags the rest of the children and Hashira into the house. Hattori hums and pats his back and goes over to see how Sabito fares in shogi. It's an interesting sight, the Rengoku household. Masechika is currently showing Giyu how to patch a hole in a haori, his movements quick. He garners praise from Ruka and flushes darkly while rubbing the back of his head. Kyojiro launches at Sabito and Hattori, much to the former's annoyance as he tries to butt into the match. Sabito and Kyojuro soon end up wrestling while Hattori watches in amusement. Shinjiro and Minato step inside the home after removing their footwear. Shinjiro heads to Ruka, greeting her with a kiss on her cheek and a fond smile. Minato sits in Sabito's spot, overtaking his game with Hattori. The Wind Hashira laughs but sets to work taking out his opponent. "How long are you remaining here for?" Minato asks as they trade moves. His brow furrows and he has to work around the play Hattori made. Hattori quickly counters, backing him into a corner. "Just one more day. We had a few demons to take care of in the area and I wanted Misakika to meet the upcoming generation of Suguko." He raises his eyes to meet Minato's. "You can't steal him though, he's mine," he says and snatches one of Minato's pieces for emphasis. Minato only laughs and continues to arrange his board. "Come now, surely you know that the kids stole me first, not the other way around," he comments, gesturing to Sabito and Kyojuro. Hattori hums. Which is why Jigoro no longer has a student and why Sakanji is wagering with me when the next one is going to come along," Hattori teases. Minato laughs sheepishly but does not deny it further. He gapes when Hattori calls checkmate and gazes at the board sharply. "You've gotten better," Minato accuses as he resets the board. Hattori shrugs and his eyes twinkle. "I wanted to see if it would help out outside of the board." Misakika is learning how to use the board the same way one would use your comrades for the best outcome. He showed a lot of promise. It seems the other kids are also stopping to think more. Minato nods. "I like to teach any of my students how to use the shogi board for plotting missions. An old friend of mine would challenge me to a game at least once a week. He was a hard opponent, I think I've only won against him a handful of times." Minato recalls fondly, eyes softening. Hattori makes his first move. "Does this friend have a name?" He prods. Minato raises a brow at the blatant question but decides there is no harm in telling him. Nara Shikaku. He had a son Naruto's age too, so he was always a stickler for having playdates. He was my advisor. Hattori nods. "If you don't mind me asking, why do you speak of them in the past tense? It doesn't sound like you know they are dead, and yet," he trails off and sets the piece in his hand down. Minato stalls a little. His smile turns sad and he finally speaks when he makes his move. "I believe it's because I have no way of knowing if they are okay. They are far away and any attempt I have made to contact them hasn't gone through. I sort of, just let it go and accepted that I only have Naruto here." Hattori hums and takes another of Minato's pieces with a quick move and a swipe. "Well, you are wrong there," he speaks. He meets Minato's questioning gaze and gestures around with his eyes. "You have us too. You are stuck with us whether you like it or not. Hiroko would be lost without you, Sakanji finds you to be a kindred spirit, Shinjiro and I see you as a brother in arms, and well, the kids would hardly let you leave. You are stuck here, with us." Hattori goes back to playing, completely bypassing the shocked look on Minato's features. The former Hokage stares at the man, catching sight of both colors of eyes even as he feels like he is somewhere far away. He wasn't in Konoha. He was somewhere odd and foreign with demons instead of shinobi. He wasn't Hokage but maybe he was becoming something else. Naruto didn't have Sasuke and Shikamaru and all the other kids his age but he had Hiroko, Kyojuro, Giyu, Sabito, Makomo, and even Misakika now. He wasn't in Konoha, but he may still be home. Minato ducks his head and lifts a hand to rub at his eyes. Hattori says nothing, and when he raises his head his eyes are wet. They continue their match. Minato wins. He feels like he wins in a lot more ways than just shogi. Naruto's birthday comes quickly. Minato starts the day like normal, waking up early, training, and even sparring with Hattori before the man leaves with Masakika. They have a long road to travel to get back to Haseharu, whom Hattori offers to bring next time. Shinjiro joins him to start setting things up, Ruka waking soon after and setting to work laying out all the sweets and treats. It's a small thing, but Minato even has a few games laid out for the kids. He finds another gift sealed away in his things. It's a picture of Kushina when she stole his Hokage hat. He's trying to get it back, and Fugaku and Makoto had the bright idea to capture the moment. Minato tucks it away with the rest of the gifts for his son as a smile tugs on his lips. He also includes one of Kushina's beginner guides to sealing, something he had wanted to put off but knew he'd have to fork over eventually. Kushina had wanted to start teaching Naruto sealing as early as he could talk, but Minato had slowed her down. She was raised in Uzumaki after all, and most Uzumaki knew how to draw seals before they even knew how to write their names. He settled on Kushina teaching Naruto as soon as he entered the academy, which would have been now. Since she wasn't around, Minato would have to step in. Kushina had written several stages of the guide to sealing for future learners. Genma had taken up the book even if he never got past the beginning stages, while Kakashi had managed to go a little farther. Jiraiya had loved the books and taken to them well enough, even if he still couldn't get past the last book. Kushina loved laughing at him over it. A fond smile covers Minato's lips as he wraps the gifts. Not in the colorful paper that his world has, but rather in fabric or the boring brown paper that this world had. He writes notes too, letters for his son that he can stow away and read at any time. Shinjiro bought a small chest for the articles, and Minato loves the idea enough that he even roped the others into doing the same thing. Soon the bottom of the box is full of letters and notes and a few trinkets from the kids, right up until the morning of the party where Minato tucks the gift away with the rest of them. He managed to get enough gifts that each kid could offer one to Naruto. He only settles when the kids wake up. Minato heads over to grab Naruto, and the squeals of glee that echo through the house get everyone else up. Naruto clings to Minato's shoulders as he takes him outside, greeting the others on the way as Naruto laughs. Minato enjoys the sound more than anything. Minato gets the kids involved in a game of tag, and shinobi skills are allowed. It dissolves into chaos quickly, but they enjoy it up until breakfast is served. After food, Minato gets them going with a few chores with the promise of a little bit of training, during which the kids hop around looking ready for the next part of the day. Naruto can hardly sit still during lunch, bouncing in Minato's lap as he chatters unhappily. Minato laughs but calms him down by getting him to try some chakra exercises. During lunch, Sakanji arrives with one of Minato's clones. He and Makomo head to Naruto immediately to give him their wishes before Makomo gravitates to Hiroko. Sakanji heads to the adults as the kids gather for the next round. After that, the kids are given a small scavenger hunt that Shinjiro set up around the manor. They all split into teams with Naruto dragging Kyojuro to his side. Hiroko pairs up with Makomo while the other two boys form a team. They rush off while Minato explains the day to Sakanji. The celebration of birthdays is vastly different between the two groups, but neither Hashira is against going Minato's route. Minato could understand their system, as his world had used something similar up until the Second Shinobi War, where other cultures bled into the general masses and birthdays were celebrated more individually. The Uzumaki were one such clan to celebrate individual birthdays, rather than all of them at once at the beginning of the new year. The kids don't seem to mind either way, and Naruto is used to rather extravagant parties because neither of his parents could stop themselves. On his last birthday, Kushina had nearly blown up their backyard with firework seals. Ruka especially enjoys the laughter as Naruto and Kyojuro grab the first item, while Makomo and Hiroko quickly get theirs. Sabito argues with Giyu, argues at Giyu while Giyu calmly finds their item and they set off again. Minato waits for the kids to finish gathering all of their items before he has them gather next to each other. They are all excited and even Hiroko and Makomo look to be barely holding themselves back. Ruka gets the kids settled and uncovers the platters of sweets she had set up. Naruto gets to pick his first before the rest of the kids find some treats to enjoy. Some of them have never had the treats, such as Sabito and Giyu, and they have to pause as they eat them. Their eyes widen and soon they find a few more treats to try. Hiroko sticks to the sakuramochi, her eyes soft as she gazes at them. Makomo is at her side and trying to get her to try some more sweets that Minato picked out. Among the spread are little Compito candies, candied nuts, dango, manju, and daifuku. Some of the treats are familiar to Minato, while others aren't. One of the main ones he was shocked not to find was taiyaki. It was a festival treat he enjoyed with Kushina, but Minato couldn't find it anywhere. Shinjiro hadn't ever heard of it either, which left Minato to wonder if it was a thing in this world. Either way, there were plenty of treats and the kids got to try a few. Minato had even packed a bundle for Hattori and Masakika so they could try them even when they weren't around. After the treats had been enjoyed, the kids were given a few more games. Minato even summoned some cards from his world to teach the kids how to play, though they soon ended up playing hide and seek, which Makomo won for her clever use of the henge. Minato also tasked the kids to bring him down in a 6 versus 1 situation. The kids had to get clever because Minato did not give them an easy out, though eventually Naruto and Kyojuro caught him by laying out enough traps that the rest of the kids had to back off for fear of being caught. With everyone now thoroughly tired out, the adults got dinner ready, allowing the kids to eat as they regained their strength. Naruto nearly cried when he saw they had made homemade ramen, earning Minato a handful of happy blonde. With a rush, Naruto downed more than 12 bowls. Kyojuro was close behind as the two entered an eating competition, much to everyone else's amused horror. The boys could eat. Following the meal, Minato handed the kids a gift each to give to Naruto, explaining the tradition to them. Some of them had even added on to the gifts, making small little trinkets or adding something else to the tops. Hiroko had gifted Naruto a knitted scarf. With the air getting colder, it was a welcomed gift. She had worked furiously to finish it in time, Minato recalled, even finishing her chores early to work on it. Ruka had helped her, though Minato wasn't sure if Hiroko had noticed or not. It had made the project come along quickly. She also handed over the gift from Minato, which happened to be a thick blanket that Kushina had been working on that Minato had finally finished with Ruka's help. Makomo and Sakanji gifted the boy a carved whistle, one that Minato suspected Sakanji had done himself. Sabito and Giyu took up the parcel with drawing utensils, gifting them to the boy along with their letters. Sabito huffed and turned his nose up, but there was a smile on his face. Naruto thanked them graciously, the scarf from before piled around his neck while the blanket covered him like a cloak. The Rengoku's gifted next, offering up a few more sweets and a bag to carry his supplies in. Shinjiro had found a nice satchel while they were shopping and swooped it up, even though Naruto had sealing scrolls. Minato couldn't fault him when he saw the nice craftsmanship, and he commented that they could even add seals to the bag later on. Minato was last, coming in with the picture of Kushina and the sealing books. Naruto could hardly drop the picture, his eyes trailing over his mother. The rest of them gathered to look at the image. "Naruto-kun, your Ka-san was pretty," Hiroko comments with wide eyes. Kyojuro nods, eyes settled on the bright red hair. "She looks like a goddess." He nods and then turns to his mother. "Like Ka-san." He confirms, and his hair fluffs as Ruka laughs. Naruto rubs the image of his mother with his thumb, glancing over at Minato. Minato offers a tender smile. "You have her smile, ya know?" He comments, using her catchphrase. "Happy birthday, Naruto." Minato offers, and Naruto's eyes water before he reaches out to tackle his father. He drags in anyone he can reach, laughter breaking through his cries. It's happiness. It's sadness, and it's an echo of Minato months ago in their fractured home. It's the warmth that radiates around all of them as Naruto's chakra pulses with each cry. His happiness evident even as he laments that he doesn't quite have his Ka-san here. This is enough. These people are enough. Minato holds him tightly, burying his face in golden locks as his chakra reacts to his sons and surrounds them. It's good to be home. Drabble guardian angel. I won't let you force your kids to fight each other. She snarls, her eyes a dark gray that edges on black. She's dangerous, anyone can see that. She's also furious. The two scared figures of his younger brothers are huddled behind her. They are shaking, eyeing the masks tossed to the side. They would have killed each other if she hadn't stepped in. He feels something grateful bubble in his chest directed at the blonde girl. Something warm and at the same time something possessive. She appeared suddenly one day. His father took her in because of her skill, never imagining that same skill would be turned against him. She's facing his father, her teeth bared as she holds a kunai. Without her, he would have killed his brothers. He would have hurt them. You should mind your own business, girl, his father starts, reaching out to drag her from the boys. She tosses her weapon, and suddenly his father is clutching his arm where a kunai is embedded. There is a cry of pain, then fury. Whimpering sounds behind her. He knows that if she weren't guarding the boys they would have run already. His father lunges. He cries to her in a warning and tries to reach her. His father isn't going to go easy on her, he's going to kill her or worse. He doesn't even get to blink. She moves so fast it's as though she were guarding his brothers 1 second, upon his father the next. There's a flicker of red around her as she moves, like a cloak. His father hits the ground with her feet on his back. He snarls and shouts, spitting shinobi ideals and that a girl has no place standing against him. His swipes cut along her leg. The wound bubbles with the red cloak, healing over. His father makes a comment about forcing the brothers to fight to the death again. They both flinch away. The girl descends. Blood splatters and she watches in vicious satisfaction as his father bleeds into the ground, gurgling. Her nails are dripping with the red liquid, elongated and sharp. She glares down at his father, a dark look in her eyes. Kids don't deserve to be treated like weapons. I'll make sure you never get to abuse them again, she snarls, fangs showing through her lips while her eyes flash red. He's never seen someone more beautiful. She steps from his father with a grimace, walking over to the snow as she shoved her hands into it to clean them off. Her elongated nails shorten and she mutters. She gets tackled by the smaller bodies of his brothers. She laughs and all the fierce hatred she showed vanishes as she smiles and holds them. She looks up at him and fear flickers in her eyes. She's worried about his reaction. He offers her a tired smile, ignoring the cooling body of his father. She relaxes and slumps around his brothers. He comes over, circling them in his arms. He's not going to let anything happen to any of them. She grips his shoulder. She isn't going to let anything happen to them either. Chapter 20. Tanuki in the sun, Kitsune in the snow. The month goes by. The first snowfall signals more than just the beginning of winter. Minato stares at the snow, holding his hands up to the flakes as they fall on his fingers. He takes a deep breath in the cold air and a haze falls from his lips and spreads in the air. He was practicing his katas in the evening air when the flakes began to build, becoming too large to ignore. He has his cloak wound around his shoulders to ward off the light chill pressing at his skin. He is regulating his body temperature with total concentration and fire chakra. It's more than effective after all of the practice Minato has had using it. His mind drifts just like the flurries of snow pressing at his skin. So much time has passed, both since he arrived in this world and since he met the demon slayers. He's beginning to realize just how quickly it's flying by. It's nearing the end of the year. Ruka looks like she is ready to give birth at any moment. The kids have mastered a few more forms, and Hiroko and Mikomo have killed their first demon. Kyojuro is getting ready to join them. It was an expected outcome after the girls pushed themselves so hard. Shinjiro could hardly deny the boy, despite how young he was when he raised the stipulation that he could train those wanting to learn fire breathing under the same deal as the others. It would help. Minato was certain that the three kids would look after one another regardless of his presence. Ruka was worried, but she had talked with her son and came out of it telling him to do his best and come home safely. She had said the same to Shinjiro and Minato every time they left for patrol, like tonight. "Are you ready?" Shinjiro calls from the porch. He's in full uniform. Minato turns his head and nods, flickering and appearing next to the man. He's dressed much the same, prepared for a night full of slaying demons. They had made an effort to go out at least 4 times a week together, and Minato even went alone once or twice. "As I'll ever be," he calls, humming as he readies his blade. It's become a comfortable weight at his side recently. With that, Shinjiro nods and they head out, leaving tracks in the snow as they bound over the walls of the estate and go on patrol. Minato stretches out his senses while the Kasugai crow chatters from Shinjiro's shoulder, informing them of demons seen in the area. He takes in the words and nods as they head to the first one. It doesn't take long. They dispatch it, Minato using his newfound forms to his advantage. He's implemented them into combat at this point and has no problems. It's the same as the last few patrols. They come across demons, some not relayed by the Kasugai crows but rather found by Minato's keen senses. They dispose of each one as easily as the last. He kills each of them the same way. Some take a little more effort than others but none give them trouble. Minato wonders if those first 2 meetings with demons were just flukes. None stand out. A vast majority of them don't even have blood arts and those that do hardly stand a chance against the 2 of them. Shinjiro takes the time to explain more about the world to Minato as they go. The government, the lack of cooperation with them regarding demon slayers, and much more. They are in the Meiji period of Japan. Minato hasn't heard of the country, but he recognizes several key features that remind him of home. Landmarks that existed in his world are mentioned, but they are entirely separate. It's almost like he went to a parallel plane rather than a completely different dimension. Minato files the thought away for later. He's been writing things down more and more. He doesn't want to forget, and he's also worried about losing these small details that tell him more of the big picture. Nara, Japan, a temple for deer. Temples spanning more regions, gods, and legends that align with his world if in different capacities. An era that is getting used to Western technology, implementing it slowly but surely. Electricity is not widespread but appears in some parts of the world. The whole thing is a mismatched puzzle with pieces from two different boxes. He's struggling to find where they fit. When they finally call it, it's well into the night and the sky is dark. Snow is still falling and Minato pauses to take in the scenery. Trees dotted with white, specks of snow covering the ground. The air is still crisp, but they breathe well enough. It's beautiful out, Minato can't help but notice. The last cover of snow he had seen was in Konoha. Minato still misses seeing the haze of snow cresting over the Hokage monument, covering the village in a sheen of white. Kushina had dragged them into a snowball fight and Naruto had proudly decked Minato in the face. Makoto had also joined in. Minato's eyes darken as he thinks of her. She was the reason he was still alive, the reason why Naruto had managed to escape that night. She had betrayed her husband after the death of her eldest in the first part of the uprising. Makoto had pushed Sasuke onto Shisui and she had taken Minato by his arm and forced him to stop and think about his son. Think about Naruto's safety, the way that Makoto hadn't thought about Itachi's until it was too late. Minato? Shinjiro asks. Ah, sorry, I'm lost in thought. Just thinking about my past, he tells the man and sighs and rubs the back of his head. Shinjiro sighs. It's a good thing we are getting ready to call it a night. Being distracted is never a good idea, he says. Minato nods. He normally is more present than this. His focus only waned when he was reminded of Makoto. Who were you thinking of? Shinjiro asks quietly. Minato turns to him in surprise, but he offers a tired smile. An old family friend, Uchiha Makoto. She was a friend of my wife and she helped Naruto and Asuka. He pauses, cutting off his words. He forgets sometimes that Shinjiro doesn't know everything. But why doesn't he? He's been there through it all. Minato might as well give the Hashira more to work with now that they have earned each other's trust. She helped us escape after I was betrayed by her husband. The damage caused her to lose her son, and she wasn't about to let the same thing happen to her friend, Minato tells him. Shinjiro meets his gaze and nods. I see. Is there a reason why you were betrayed? He asks quietly. Minato lets out a bitter laugh. Well, mostly because some people felt oppressed. I was the village leader, but I could hardly cater to everyone. They enacted a coup d'etat with the help of the organization that wanted the powerful chakra inside of myself and my son. His chakra pulses as he grits his teeth. I had thought I had done enough to keep them happy, but in the end, they still weren't satisfied. Not until they had pushed too far and endangered everything we cared for, Minato says. You sound bitter, Shinjiro comments. He's watching him carefully and his tone isn't judgmental, just curious. Minato gives him a sharp look. I grew up around Fugaku and Makoto. Fugaku was my best man at my wedding and the one who stood as a witness to my recommendation as village leader. I never expected him to betray me the way he did. Shinjiro nods, eyes softening. He can't quite understand the betrayal coloring Minato's words, but he understands the edge in his tone and the hurt. His chakra is pulsing around him in a haze, rising with his emotions. Minato takes a deep breath and quickly calms himself, ignoring the burning rush under his skin. Even with Kurama on his side, the chakra knows what it wants. It wants to feed off of his anger and push him to use more and more until nothing is left. The Biju chakra is all-consuming. Minato is still surprised that Kushina fought it as well as she did when it presses against his senses all the time, especially when he's angry. Shinjiro grips his shoulder tightly, grounding him. Minato thanks him and once he's settled he takes a look around again. They are quite far out, farther than Minato had intended to go. Then again, something is edging on his senses. Something pulled him further and further as they killed more and more demons and fell into his thoughts. Now, as he's clearing his head, it's easier to see that he was influenced by more than his heavy thoughts when he was working tonight. Maybe he had been distracted the whole time but not noticed until Shinjiro voiced the problem. They can get back in an instant, so it's not much of a hindrance for them to be this far out after all. It's just worrying to Minato that he had been influenced. Was it the thrum of Biju chakra? Was it the anger making him seek more demons to kill it off? His gaze shifts around the landscape. He looks out into the woods, toward a large mountain covered in trees. There is a village on the other side of it that Shinjiro told him about. The village isn't what's drawing out the chakra inside of him. No, it's something at the top of the mountain. Minato? Shinjiro calls again as his hand drops from Minato's shoulder. He is watching the man carefully as Minato takes a step toward the mountain. Minato raises a hand, his chakra extending. He reaches out for the haze, allowing his Biju chakra to surface. It's warm and he has to steady himself as it fogs his mind. He focuses, clearing it just enough as he tries to find what it's drawn to. A warm pulse under his skin, an echo of the chakra below. He's not a sensor, but even he can feel the jolt that happens when he reaches out. Even he can recognize the rush of Biju chakra kept under wraps. His blue eyes narrow. Why would there be Biju chakra here? Did a demon acquire something similar? Naruto is home with the others and nowhere near here. Not unless. Shukaku, Kurama calls deep within as Minato feels the fox's eyes open within him. Minato tenses. Shukaku is the name of the Ichibi. He was supposed to be sealed inside of the case cage's son, something that Minato had overseen to keep the boy alive. Raza hadn't agreed with him much but he allowed Minato to fix the seal enough that his wife survived. Kushina had been furious when she found out about how the Ichibi was sealed. It was disastrous and dangerous to do something so idiotic. She had nearly taken Raza's head off. They succeeded in sealing off enough of the influence that Gaara could sleep, but sometimes Minato worried that they hadn't done enough. He hadn't thought about the boy since he had his mess to handle, but if Shukaku was here, then Gaara had to be as well. Minato, Shinjiro calls again, settling a hand on his shoulder once more, though this time it's to tug him back. Minato jolts, his hand dropping as he turns sharply to Shinjiro. He takes in the questioning stare and turns back to the mountain. He flares his chakra again, adding a bit more of the Kyuubi. The chakra responds. He grimaces. He isn't sure if this is a good thing. There's someone with the same type of chakra as me on that mountain. They shouldn't be here, Minato informs Shinjiro. Shinjiro looks over to the mountain and furrows his brow. You want to check it out? He asks even though he knows the answer. He receives a nod and sighs. Very well. Minato nods and the two begin to head to the mountain. Minato keeps his chakra open, allowing the other presents to keep track of him. He doesn't want to frighten them, and if it is Gaara, cause a problem for the Jinchuriki. The mountain is steep, especially with the snow. They manage thanks to their training, but it makes Minato wonder how Gaara got to the top. He ponders the situation. If Gaara is here, then what does that mean? Minato was here because he used the Kyuubi's chakra to jump as far as he could to save Naruto. You used Biju chakra, Kurama calls from his mind. Minato almost slips, catching himself as he picks up his pace. He ignores Shinjiro's worried glance as he questions the fox. What do you mean? Quote. Minato is half focused on the discussion in his mindscape, half focused on the pulse of chakra ahead of him. It's growing stronger as they near the top. You pulled chakra from both of my halves to make it work. There is a possibility that you pulled chakra through me from some others too. Minato ponders the possibility. He had reached for as much chakra as he could because he was worried about Naruto. He had never thought he could pull the Biju chakra from more than one source. Unless. Are the Biju linked together? Quote. Kurama hums in his head. We were once one being. We can still speak to one another if needed, he reveals. Minato gets the image of the fox sitting curled up, his tails waving around in agitation. He swallows a lump in his throat. Chakra was connected. All living beings were connected through nature chakra, and the networks inside of a human body helped the body function. Biju were beings made of chakra, and if they had been one at some point, then it went to reason that they were still connected. But still, how could he pull on that connection? He would have to also be tied to it. Only a Biju or something tied intrinsically to them would have that ability. Would being a Jinchuriki be enough? A pause, then a hum echoing in his mindscape. So, that's what you did, old man. There was a note in Kurama, one of realization and amusement that was not directed at Minato but rather at something far away. He's wistful, and it's about the only time Minato has ever heard the fox say something in that tone. Minato wanted to ask the fox what it was, but he stopped when a house came into view. Standing in front of the house, tucked next to a taller man, was Gaara. His hair was just as bright as the last time Minato had seen it. His eyes were the same green, and he still had the tattoo for love on his forehead. The only difference between then and now was the lack of dark circles around his eyes and the way the boy did not reek of blood. Instead, he was curious and protective. Minato could see how hesitant he was as he eyed them both. Familiarity rushed through him when he spotted Minato. Hokage-sama, the boy calls out in shock. His green eyes catch Minato's blue ones, and there is something suspicious there. Minato meets them up until the adult shifts and puts Gaara protectively behind him. Minato looks at the man. Dark red hair, dark red eyes, and 2 earrings hanging from his ears. They looked like traditional cards shaped for earrings. Hanafuda patterns. He held himself well enough, but there was something odd about him that Minato could sense. He eyed them both carefully before he looked down at Gaara. Do you know them, Gaara? He asks softly. His voice is calm and soothing, a note to it similar to what Minato gathered from Oyakata-sama. Just Hokage-sama. I don't know the other. Gaara speaks, pointing to each of them. He then shifts his eyes over to Minato again. Why are you here? He asks. Minato wants to ask him the same thing. He isn't sure if he wants to know the answer either. My name is Kamado Tanjiro, how about you two come in so we can talk? The man offers. Gaara relaxes against him, holding onto the man's haori with a death grip. He's only a year older than Naruto, but Minato can see that he's not nearly as big as Naruto is. That would be nice. My name is Namikaze Minato. This is my companion Rengoku Shinjiro. Minato inclines his head to the two, his eyes hardly straying from Gaara. Tanjiro nods with a smile and they follow the two redheads inside. Gaara immediately gets tackled by a tiny figure when they enter the door. The appearance of the toddler tells Minato that this must be Tanjiro's son. He's happy as he grips Gaara tightly. Gaara's face softens and he hugs the boy. It's the softest Minato had ever witnessed the boy being with anyone other than his mother before she passed. Then again, with a father like Raza, Minato is just surprised Gaara can still be this kind. They enter the door, removing their shoes before stepping inside. Another figure walks into the room, her eyes finding Tanjiro's as she gives him a questioning stare. She's pregnant, possibly as far along as Ruka is. Her eyes are a rich violet and she has dark hair that is held behind her head. Tanjiro, what's going on? She asks. Tanjiro leans down to kiss her forehead before gesturing behind him to the two. Gaara knows one of them. I invited them to get things sorted. This is Namikaze Minato and the other is Rengoku Shinjiro. Tanjiro informs her. She nods, sighing but offering them a small smile. I am Kamado Kai, welcome to our home. Would you like some tea? She asks politely. Minato waves the offer off. There's no need, we are intruding on you after all. He starts but she levels him with a sharp stare. Minato's mouth snaps shut. She almost looked like Kushina when she was telling Minato to shut up and eat. I insist, she says sharply. Minato nods, knowing that it's best not to argue. Shinjiro chuckles and Minato ignores him in favor of taking a seat where Tanjiro guides them. Gaara returns, the little boy clinging to his waist even as he sits next to Tanjiro. He's dragged close to Tanjiro's side as Minato observes them. It's obvious that Gaara has been adopted by the Kamados. Minato is certain of that. Considering Gaara's only caring adult figure left was his uncle, well, Minato is glad he has someone. Gaara, I know you recognize me, but may I ask how much you remember? Minato begins. Gaara's brow furrows. He observes Minato calmly before speaking. I know you came to check on me, and that you are the Yondaime Hokage, he reveals. He looks down, fiddling with his hands. And I know you have the Kyuubi inside of you. Minato feels his body go tense. He looks at the boy and sighs heavily, raising a hand to his head. He runs his fingers through his hair as he tries to think. Do you remember how you got here? He asks. Gaara looks at the little boy pressed into his side, calmly petting his head. I was home with Tamari and Kankuro. I remember a haze and a lot of colors and I wanted to puke, and it got hard to see, then I opened my eyes and I was here. I couldn't focus and it was hard to stand. I couldn't find any of them, so I stayed put. Minato sighs heavily. That sounded remarkably like what happened to him, or more aptly, the first time someone experienced Hiroshin. He isn't sure how it was possible, but there was a good chance that Gaara had been tugged into his jump across dimensions. He just needed one more clue. "How long have you been here?" Minato asks. Gaara looks over at Tanjiro. The man is observing the boy, but he shifts his attention to Minato when Gaara gives him a questioning look. "We found him the day he arrived. He appeared on the 15th day of the second month," Tanjiro informs him. Gaara leans against his side tiredly, closing his eyes. Minato's heart stutters in his chest. His head pounds and he bows his head. He grips his hair and lets out a shaky breath as his hand drops to his lap. Shinjiro reaches out to take his shoulder. Minato glances through his mused hair at the man and debates. That was the exact date that he dropped into this world. That was the day that he came to this strange land with Naruto in tow. "Minato?" Shinjiro asks. "Excuse me," Minato murmurs and rises to his feet. He tries to ignore the startled look on those present as he bolts out the doors. His feet hit the snow, the cold shocking him even as he darts down the path. He stops only when he's a good distance from the house and he spawns a clone. He has one objective, and right now he isn't up for having a shouting match in his head. He needs answers. The Kyuubi's chakra floods the clone. The flicker of red over the clone settles as Kurama comes into being in front of him. His eyes are narrowed, and the slits cast on Minato even as he leans back against a tree. "What the hell?" Minato demands. Kurama's lips twitch to reveal his fangs. "Quiet, idiot. I'm sure you can figure it out." Minato grimaces. His eyes narrow on the fox in human form and he runs his hand through his hair again as he starts to pace. "How did I manage to drag another Jinchuriki with me?" Minato asks. His heart is pounding in his chest, echoing in his ears like a dull thrum. He had only meant to take Naruto. Except he had been frantic. He had been scared, and the only thing on his mind was fulfilling his promise to Kushina. He had a choice, and when he made it he had nearly torn himself apart grabbing for as much chakra as he could. Naruto had been terrified, but he had gripped Minato's arm and helped. "You aren't the one with the connection." "He is." He pulled on as much chakra as he could, and he pulled on the chakra of more than just his version of me, Kurama tells him, pushing off the tree to stop in front of Minato. He reaches out to grab Minato's wrist, halting him in place. Minato turns to face him. There's a heated moment as the two glare at one another, but finally, Minato relents and looks down. His head is still spinning. If Naruto pulled at the other Biju, then was it possible that he pulled Gaara in? He had briefly met Gaara too, so that could also explain how he had grabbed a hold of Shukaku's chakra. Minato sighs. What if Gaara wasn't the only one? He looks over at Kurama. Can you locate any others? He asks. Kurama meets his gaze. His grin turns feral again. All of them. Minato wants to curse. Shinjiro had been worried when Minato had taken off so abruptly. Even so, he hadn't expected Gaara to get up and ask him to come with him. Tanjiro had joined them, but he held back as Gaara walked over to the two arguing figures. One looks oddly like Minato. The other is Minato, but he's looking more shaken than Shinjiro has ever seen him. Shinjiro stalls with Tanjiro just outside of their little clearing. Gaara comes to a stop next to Minato. He peers up at him, then over at the red-haired man. Kyuubi-sama? Gaara asks calmly. His eyes are shifting between the two now. The redhead nods. Yes. You must be Shukaku's host. Minato grimaces. He reaches over to whack the other over the head but is dodged and unceremoniously dropped on his ass by a quick swipe of the other's foot. Gaara watches this happen. Shukaku wants to speak to you, he comments. Minato ends up sitting cross-legged in the snow, eyes scanning the little boy before he looks up at his counterpart. Any idea how we can do that? I don't exactly want to give the Ichibi a clone, Minato asks. Kyuubi huffs and nods. I will dispel. Bring the kid into your mindscape, he orders. Minato nods even as the clone pops, fading into a red haze. That leaves him with Gaara. He faces the boy and offers his fist. It won't hurt or anything, it can be disorienting though, Minato tells him. Gaara eyes his fist, but something seems to click as he raises his smaller one and bumps it with the man. They remain stock still for some time after that. Neither of them moves and Shinjiro worries for them. He shares a glance with his other companion and they walk over to the two. They come to stand next to their companion and watch as the two remain where they are. Their eyes are closed and their breathing is calm. Minato suddenly opens his eyes. He peers down at Gaara as the boy pulls away and steps back, right into Tanjiro's leg. His eyes widen and he looks up but relaxes when he sees Tanjiro. Everything all right? Shinjiro asks. Minato nods, and though he looks more relaxed there is still a heavy weight on his shoulders. He lets Shinjiro help him up and only then does he give a full reply. I just realized that things are more complicated than I thought, Minato replies, offering a hesitant smile to Gaara. Gaara tucks his head against Tanjiro's side and offers nothing but a short nod back. They descend into silence and make their way back to the house. Minato is pondering the whole time. Shinjiro can see that he is shaken and worried. When he catches Shinjiro's gaze, Minato hums. I'll explain when we get back. For now, I just want to talk to the Kamados about Gaara. I just need to make sure he's okay, he says and offers a small smile. Then he turns and goes right back to business as they enter the house once more. It's going to be a long night, of that, Shinjiro is certain. When they finally do get home, Minato wants nothing more than to collapse and sleep for a day. His head hurts as he tries to piece together the enigma that is this world and the Biju that now resides within it. When he does try, it only causes more pain, so he stops. Later, he left a seal for Hirishin at the Kamado home after informing Tanjiro of what it was. He also left them with one of his kunai just in case, with an explanation of how to use it. Minato hightails it to the bath before he goes to bed. He's gross and he doesn't want to sleep when he feels this disgusting. Shinjiro is already there but neither says a word. They are operating on autopilot and they head to their respective rooms when they are finished. Naruto is resting in his room when he gets back, tugged between Giyu and Sabito. Kyojuro isn't there and a cursory pulse tells Minato that the boy is tucked in with his mother. Hiroko isn't present, off with Jigoro to hunt demons that night. Minato would worry but she has his kunai and he has enough on his plate after tonight. Jigoro can manage to keep her safe for a day. He nestles between the pile of boys, earning soft grumbles before they all settle against his sides. He closes his eyes, willing sleep to take him quickly. It's a good thing that the boys are there because that's about the only reason Minato's mind relaxes enough to let him sleep. He drifts into slumber, but inside his mind, he's awake and planning. Planning with Kurama. Kurama eyes him from where he sits nestled in his tails. There's another figure to the side of him. Shukaku, the Ichibi. The tanuki is trying to rile up the fox but isn't succeeding. Standing next to him is Gaara. Minato had been worried about the implications of a linked mindscape, but after the talk with Gaara, he realized that only the Biju could trigger such a thing, and it wasn't like Gaara would have free rein on his mind or vice versa. "How are you feeling?" Minato asks, sitting down on the grassy landscape. Gaara peers at him oddly but takes a seat next to him to watch Kurama shove Shukaku into a bush with his tails. "I'm okay. Just confused. Tired too," Gaara murmurs. He's still a quiet kid, but Minato can see that the Kamados have done him well. He's not hesitant to speak, and he is willing to be near Minato even if he's not close. "Understandable. I am too. For what it's worth, I'm sorry if I scared you," Minato begins, raising a hand to halt Gaara from opening his mouth. "But I'm glad that you found a good family. I have no way of getting back, well, not a guaranteed method, and if you are happy right now then that's okay," Minato tells him. He had thought long and hard, but he couldn't with a good conscious attempt to get back to the elemental nations. Maybe some other time when he didn't have responsibilities to his son or others, but not right now. If something went wrong, Minato didn't want to fathom it. "They're nice. I like them," Gaara offers calmly, leaning down to circle his legs with his arms. He has a faint twitch on his lips. A gentle smile. "If you wanted, I could also introduce you to another kid like you. He's my son, Naruto," Minato offers. Gaara looks at him, tilting his head in confusion. It's a cute gesture. He's a Jinchuriki. We both hold parts of Kurama, the Kyuubi, inside of us. He likes making friends and he can be a bit much at first, but I know he'd like you," Minato tells the boy with a smile. Gaara's eyes go wide. "He'd want to be my friend?" He asks quietly. "Oh, Kami, damn it all. If Minato ever gets back to the elemental nations he is going to kill Rasa. No kid should have to wonder if they are loved or worthy of it, and Minato can see immediately that Gaara doesn't expect to be wanted. He doesn't expect Naruto to like him or want to be near him. Minato holds his anger back and nods with a genuine smile. "Naruto would love to be your friend. I promise. You can meet him when you are ready." Gaara nods, looking down. "Maybe after Nezuko is born. Kai-san needs help and I want to be there," he murmurs. Minato nods. "That's perfectly acceptable. You get to choose Gaara. No one is going to make you leave them if you are happy." Gaara peers at him again. His eyes are shining, but he nods and looks at the two arguing Biju again. "Yeah. They do make me happy," he murmurs, remembering the kind hugs and the affectionate gestures that he never has to ask for, they are just given to him. Tanjiro's hugs and Kai's kisses, Tanjiro's rambunctious tackles and the kicks Nezuko gives in Kai's stomach. He doesn't want to lose that. He won't let anyone take it from him. He's glad that Minato understands. He's never had an adult really try to understand him except for his uncle, and even then his uncle was always busy, always caring for Temari and Kankuro, and never quite there the way Gaara needed. Tanjiro is there, Kai is there. They welcomed him with open arms. Drabble, a friend to count on. "You should stop following me," he snaps at her. It's not the first time and he fears it won't be the last. The girl laughs and sprints, twisting in the air as her wings spring forth. She hovers in front of him. "Ah, but you are the only nice person I've met. I can't very well go off on my own," she says and pouts, landing on her toes as she levels him with a glare. Her eyes are still a bright golden hue that puts him on edge. "Fu, I'm more dangerous than any of the other humans here," he snaps. Fu raises a brow. She brings hand up to push back her blue-green bangs and leans closer to him. Even as she bends her back, she rises with the wings on her back pulling her up. She reaches out and ruffles his pink hair and smirks. "You don't get to be scary with hair like that and tattoos like those. You look like a child's ball," she says and laughs. He grimaces, swatting her hand away. He's gentle as he does so, even though he's watched this same kid take a demon's blow to her chest and still get up with very little difficulty. He doesn't want to hurt her. Beyond her being female, when he doesn't eat women, he has no desire to hurt Fu. "You do realize these tattoos get put on criminals?" he counters. She drops back beside him, content to walk for the moment even though she hardly ever does. She loves flying, and he can't blame her. "Maybe here, but not where I come from. Criminals normally get seals on them or just lose a few fingers depending on what they did. I don't think you could do anything that bad unless the person deserved it," she says firmly. Akaza grits his teeth in annoyance. "You have no idea what I'm capable of, Fu." She turns to him and her eyes flicker to that same burning red as she observes him. He knows she isn't a demon, but Akaza can't quite figure out what she is. "What did you do then?" she demands. He opens his mouth to retort but freezes. His head pounds. He doesn't know. He doesn't remember. Fu eyes him as he gapes like a fish, unable to answer her. She waits, and when he fails to produce a response, the cheerful edge returns and she springs up as her eyes return to normal. "If you can't tell me what you did, then you can't use that as an excuse." She sings and her wings flutter. He reaches out to swat her away and grimaces as she flies into the sky. She's off to bother who knows what while he rests. The sun is rising and she knows he can't be in it. He has an edge in his mind, a thought that keeps stirring every time he thinks of her words. Why can't he remember what he did to get these tattoos? Unfortunately, this part is over. I hope you enjoyed it. My apologies for all those quotes. Please have a good morning, afternoon, evening or night. See you next time, faves.